Someone said to me, "Go home, you broke, jobless old lady. What are you doing on this trip for free?" I'm so disappointed in my family, as usual. I'll show you what hell looks like. I decided to deal with them while taking some alone time away from my family. My brother called me and asked, "What did you do?" My name is Lucy. I'm 30 years old and work in an office. I've been dating a wonderful guy named Alan for about 3 years. We met in college where he was a senior, and I often asked him for advice on work and personal issues. He always listened carefully and gave good advice. After we started working, we kept meeting up, and one day he told me he loved me. We began dating, and things have been going well ever since. We're even thinking about getting married soon. One day, Alan proposed to me, saying, "Lucy, I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" I said yes, and we decided to get married. We told our families about our engagement. When I met Alan's family, his mother was really nice to me. She was kind and friendly, and we had a lovely time together. She even gave me a lot of compliments, which made me a bit shy. The meeting went well, and I felt relieved. Next, I had to introduce Alan to my family, which made me feel down. The reason is, I don't really like my family. My parents were both very good at sports and got into college on athletic scholarships. They expected me to be good at sports too, but I wasn't. They made me try different sports like basketball, swimming, table tennis, and figure skating, but I was never good at any of them. I was only average at sports, which wasn't good enough for my parents. They were clearly frustrated with me. When my brother Kyle was born, they had high hopes for him in sports too. Kyle turned out to be very good at soccer. The local youth coach said he had talent, and my parents were thrilled. They shifted all their attention to Kyle, calling him a genius and treating me like a disappointment. As I grew older, my parents paid no attention to me. I focused on my studies and did well, but they said it didn't matter. When I wanted to go to college, they said they couldn't afford it, so I had to rely on scholarships. Meanwhile, Kyle continued to excel in soccer and even got a soccer scholarship to high school. My parents were overjoyed and believed he would go pro. Kyle started to look down on me and insult me, saying things like, "You're a loser and a burden. Mom and Dad don't like you. If you weren't here, they could invest more in me." My parents never stopped him, and his insults hurt my self-esteem. Even though I got into a good college and landed a good job, I still felt unimportant compared to Kyle's successes. My parents were prouder of Kyle than ever. While I was working hard to pay back my student loans, Kyle was still living at home, getting all the love and attention from my parents. He was in college and playing soccer, but he couldn't go pro in the end and had to find a job. Despite this, my parents were still proud of him, and he continued to live happily at home. Every Christmas, when relatives came over, my parents introduced me as their disappointing daughter and Kyle as their pride. Even when relatives tried to say something nice about me, my parents brushed it off, insisting Kyle was much better. This always made me feel upset. Eventually, I stopped going to these gatherings and was hesitant to introduce my fiancé, Alan, to my family. Alan knew about my family's behavior, but wanted to meet them anyway. So after many years, I decided to call my mom and tell her the news. Her response was cold, and she barely acknowledged me. I told her Alan wanted to meet the family, but she seemed indifferent and suggested we just get married without a meeting. Then Kyle's voice came through on the phone, and he mocked the idea of meeting Alan, saying he wanted to see how lame my fiancé was. When Kyle said he wanted to invite us, Mom agreed. I was upset but decided to visit my family on my next day off. I prepared myself for the possibility that they might treat me badly. Yeah, I get it. If that phone call was any indication, your family is quite something, Alan said. I explained that it had been tough dealing with them and apologized, but since we were getting married, Alan insisted on meeting my family. We agreed to keep it short and then leave. We drove to my family's home. When we rang the bell, no one answered, so I used my key to let us in. In the living room, I saw my family sitting on the sofa and was surprised to see a young woman I didn't know. I decided to greet everyone. Hi everyone, it's been a while. This is my fiancé, Alan. Nice to meet you all, I said. As I introduced him, my family looked at Alan, and Kyle made a rude comment, which even made Alan awkwardly chuckle. Kyle then introduced the woman next to him. This is Mia, my wife. We've been living here since we got married, Kyle said. I was shocked. Wait, you're married? I asked, wide-eyed. Yeah, last year, Kyle replied. I couldn't believe it. My mom looked annoyed and told me it wasn't my business. I was stunned that Kyle had married without telling me. When Dad addressed Alan, he asked, I'm not interested in you, but what do you do for a living? If you're marrying Lucy, it can't be anything impressive. I was angry at Dad's comment. Alan gently held me back and apologized for the rudeness. Alan handed his business card to Dad. At first, Dad looked at it dismissively, but then his eyes widened. You're a lawyer, Dad exclaimed. Mom, Kyle, and Mia were also surprised. Wow, this is amazing, Mom said. Elizabeth, get some tea for our guest. The family's attitude changed instantly. They were now very interested in Alan and even asked if his salary was high. Mom requested a designer bag for her. Here's your text with proper punctuation and shorter paragraphs. Birthday showed how quickly they shifted their view once they learned Alan's profession. I was shocked by how shameless my family was, especially Mia. It was audacious of her to say such things to Alan when they first met. Alan responded with a polite smile, but I was uncomfortable with the way they were behaving. During a meeting between our families, my parents and Kyle's family were very enthusiastic. Even my mother-in-law seemed surprised by their eagerness. After the meeting, I apologized to my mother-in-law, but she had already heard about it from Alan and reassured me not to worry. I felt relieved knowing my mother-in-law was genuinely nice. 2 months later, Alan and I got married. Even though my family had always been indifferent to me, they attended the wedding. Afterward, they started calling us frequently, inviting us to dinner at a fancy restaurant. I suspected they were only interested in Alan's money because he's a lawyer. We were busy, so I told them we couldn't make it right now and would let them know when we could. My mom responded enthusiastically, saying they were free anytime. I felt disgusted because they seemed to care more about taking advantage of Alan than about me. A few months later, Mom called again, asking when we would join them for dinner. She spoke in a sweet tone, saying they were planning to celebrate her 50th birthday. She added that since they raised me through high school, it would be nice to show some gratitude. I could tell my mom was getting impatient and expected us to treat her well, but she did have a point. I had managed my own college expenses, but my parents had supported me up until then. Maybe it was time to show some appreciation. When Mom turned 50, I agreed to join the celebration. She was thrilled and suggested a family vacation. I wasn't too excited about it, but I saw it as an opportunity for Alan and me to spend some quality time together. Alan agreed, so we decided to go. Mom was ecstatic when I told her. She asked me to handle the reservations and sent me a bunch of URLs for luxury hotels and high-end restaurants. I was annoyed by the extravagance, but went ahead with the bookings. When I called to confirm the reservations, Mom was overjoyed and thanked me. The day of the family vacation arrived, and we flew to Florida. Everyone seemed excited. Alan and I decided to spend some time alone and not join the family for souvenir shopping. We planned to meet up for dinner at the fancy restaurant we had booked. Time flew by as Alan and I enjoyed exploring, and we arrived at the restaurant where our parents and Kyle's family were already waiting. When we arrived at the restaurant, Mom and the others were rude. They told Alan they only wanted to talk to him and thanked him for paying for the dinner and hotel. Then they turned on me, calling me a parasite and telling me to go home. I was disgusted by their behavior and realized they had planned to exclude me from the start. I decided to take action. I told Alan I'd leave and went to book a room at a different hotel. Luckily, I found a good hotel with a cancellation. I settled in with a nice view and enjoyed a coffee. Kyle called me, asking what I did. I told him I'd moved to another hotel and that Alan could join me there. Alan arrived at my hotel later, grinning. He said they were furious and that they had to pay the bill because he left before the food arrived. We were both frustrated by their behavior, but shook it off. We enjoyed a meal at the hotel's upscale restaurant, relaxed in our room, and the next morning, we explored the area. To avoid our parents, we changed our flight to an earlier one. While waiting for our flight, Mom called me, furious. She demanded to know why there was a hotel bill for $1,000 and said we couldn't afford it. She called me arrogant and a parasite. I told her I was planning to pay for the whole trip to thank them for their support, but their behavior ruined it. Mom was shocked when I told her I earn more than Dad and have substantial savings. I decided to cut ties completely, hung up, and blocked their numbers. They couldn't find us because they didn't know where we lived or worked. However, my family went to Alan's law firm, caused a scene, and demanded to see him. Kyle even broke some office equipment, which led to their arrest. After spending so much on the trip, they now had to pay for damages and fines. Both Dad and Kyle lost their jobs and now work part-time, living in poverty. Meanwhile, Alan and I are happy, and we recently celebrated the birth of our beautiful daughter with my mother-in-law. I'm looking forward to cherishing our new family and living a joyful, fulfilling life.